quality is more important than the quantity. And we are lucky that Professor BALAGANAPATHI is able to make all the way from Delhi University. For some of you who are not aware of his performance in academic, it is for the second term that he has been also elected as an executive member of the Federation of the International Philosophical Society at the Rome session. And I was, of course, one of the voters for him as a representative of the IPC.
Thank you for that.
Professor BALAGANAPATHI, though in age younger than me, but he is academically very, very active, versatile, dynamic, and he used to present papers in several forums. So those of you who are present here, you are very lucky to listen to him. He is very articulate, and he will be presenting his paper on the title Transforming Episteme. No?
Yes.
Yeah.
I will give the title.
Yeah, over to Professor Ganapathy.
Namaste. Sabhaya Namaha. Respected Chair, Professor Mao, senior colleagues, Professor Sebastian, and good friends, Professor Lakshmikant Padi, Ram Singh, and Abhishek, of course my co-panelists, Professor Vikram, and other friends who have joined here today, and colleagues from this college. Before I begin, I have to express my gratitude to Dr. Namita Kalita. In fact, from the beginning, almost for 6-7 months she has been working on this, and she was constantly in touch and made me come here. Thank you so much, Dr. Namita, for inviting me. I really felt very happy to be here. And I also congratulate you for organizing this such a wonderful way. And I'm sure college has many good days to come, and philosophy will also flourish here. That's what I anticipate to happen. And your good efforts would definitely work towards that. And even this conference, the seminar that is proposed with theme, Theory of Knowledge, Indian and Western Perspectives, at this particular college called Patatrava Sri Shankardev College. I should express my inability. I am not a good scholar of Shankardev, so that's why I am not able to relate to what I am going to speak with his thought. Though I see a possibility of relating it with his thought, but I am not doing it because of my own ignorance of the philosophy of Srimata Shankardev. The theme that I have chosen is something that can be very close to each one of us, because we have been listening to academic discussions on philosophy, and I want to take it a bit away from academic way of doing philosophy, and that's where I believe any one of you friends, your colleagues from other departments as well, can get themselves related to what I'm speaking. The theme that I have chosen is Epistemic Transformation and Philosophical Counseling, Insights from Vivekapanchakam of Panchadasi. So this theme has different parts. The first part is how do we understand philosophy itself? Only in an academic sense, pure academic sense, where we write papers and debate and publish, or is there any other ulterior way of making philosophy useful to us in this very practical life when we are sitting here? So that's one of the concerns that comes out in the form of transformative philosophy. And the second part of it is like looking at philosophical counseling, which is one of the philosophical practices, to be attempting that transformation within the individual. And the third part of this talk is how do we look at that? Where do we look for the resources? So I have been working on philosophical practices within India, taking resources from India. So that is how my resources for this particular talk are situated in a wonderful text called Panchadasi, written by Swami Vidyaranya. And in that book, I would be taking only first 5 chapters and trying to present it. how that would be helpful for transformation of the individual, and how we can take tools from this particular text to see that transformation is possible, I mean the tools of transformation which can be used in philosophical counseling. So this is what I'm going to do in this brief time, and I believe I have 25, 30 minutes.
Yes.
Yeah. I'll try to finish it within time, but if I'm crossing my time, I have a guardian who can take care of the time. Difference between, one of the important aspects is to look at the difference between academic way of doing philosophy and also trying to understand what philosophy in general asks us to do. Is it that it is only asking us to do academic philosophy in the sense that I teach, transfer some information, and then it is over? Or do you think philosophy has some other motive than that? Is one of the important concerns, where the distinction between academic philosophy and philosophy in general, philosophy as practice, try to bring out. And something that is rooted in this particular domain is, can philosophy in general and academic philosophy, be transformative in nature? Can they transform us? Can knowing something from philosophy transform us? Is it possible? At least when we, not in a bookish way, when we translated philosophy in terms of love of wisdom, knowledge, etc. What is it that is happening? Is it that just getting the degree and then coming out and leaving it there itself? I mean, I see we have a senior colleague here, Professor Sebastian. He has been probably teaching philosophy for 50 years. Or 50 years, right, sir? You are with philosophy for 50 years. So I would straight away ask him, did philosophy impact your life at any point of time? If it did not, then it's merely an academic exercise where we are contributing, but contributing to, not to the life, but to the academia. So how do we deal with that? Whether philosophy is conceptualized initially to be something that transforms the individual. For instance, if we take Socrates, did he try to only transform some information, or try to transform the individual himself? Is one of the interesting things. And if you look at any of the Indian philosophical systems, you would find that this transformative nature of the individual is at the core of doing philosophy. So that is how it is not just, Shankara is not just teaching, or Buddha is not just teaching. They are also at the same time trying to transform the individuals. If that is the case, what is the kind of transformation that is happening becomes very important for us to look at. And that's where it's like some people said transformation is from suffering to ananda. If you look at any of the Vedic philosophical systems, you would find that even Sankhya philosophy begins by saying that dukkhatraya abhigata jigyasa. That is how the philosophical systems begin. Sankhya begins dukkhatraya abhigata jigyasa. There is threefold dukkha that is existent, which is to be overcome. And similarly, if you look at Buddhism begins with dukkha and helps us to transform ourselves beyond dukkha. So, I mean, there is a constant quest towards transforming the individual than merely acquiring some information and leaving it there. So, if that is the case, even if you look at Advaita Vedanta, it is transformation from ignorance to knowledge. So, there are two kinds of transformations that we find. One, being changing, change within the being. The second one is moving from ignorance to knowledge. So there are two kinds of transformations that are happening. This is where I ask this question. Is transformation in philosophy primarily metaphysical, a change in the being, or epistemological, a change in knowing? So how did philosophers look at this? Did they look at it only as a change in the epistemology, right? Like I moved from ignorance to knowledge. Is this over? And if that is the case, can I even call that to be knowledge? If that is not impacting my being, can I consider that knowledge to be knowledge at all? Or should I leave it as information? Right? So what is it that philosophy basically tries to do, or philosophers in the classical times were trying to do, right? This is my major concern. So here, what changes becomes important. in epistemological transformation, how I know and interpret reality may change. In a metaphysical sense, what I am and how I exist may change. So I would actually encourage friends to look at existential philosophy, right? This would directly try to hit that, and the focus, what is the focus if you want to transform epistemological transformation that you're looking at? One is, it could be your beliefs, concepts and worldviews. Here, one caution is, I'm not getting into Getty's problem of justify true belief, okay? But we do live on beliefs, when you live, in fact, I have been arguing, all of you also know it, that if I ask you the question, which is more powerful in the sense that something that can induce to action, knowledge or belief? Mostly it is belief that can induce you to action. Knowledge, most of the times, fails to induce you to action. Simple example is, when you believe that a black cat should not cross your path when you are coming out of your house, 100 times black cat crosses, you go back to your house. But you know that red light should not be crossed, but you would at least 50 times cross the red light. So, knowledge, mostly, knowledge fails you to induce to action, but whereas belief can 100% can do that. No? There could be many reasons because of the uncertainty, etc., that you are ready to, red light case, you know the certainties, so that is how you are ready to cross that. With regard to belief, you don't know the certainties, so that is how you don't take a chance, So there are different epistemic relations that exist within that which induce individuals to action. So similarly, if you are looking at metaphysics, probably you can stop one of them. I don't need both of them, one is enough. Yeah, metaphysical transformation, if we are looking at, the being, selfhood and mode of existence seem to be changing. No? So that's one of the concerns that I'm looking at. So here the question that I have is, can a change in how we know become a change in who we are? Is this possible? If we know if there is a change in how I know, because I say this in many platforms saying that your epistemology determines your metaphysics. Don't think that epistemology and metaphysics stay outside somewhere in Plato's forms, They stay within us. The way you have learned to look at things constructs your reality for you. From your childhood onwards, how people have taught you, saying that you should look at a cow this way, a fish this way, a human being this way, caste this way. This is what constructs your reality, and this reality is what you try to interact with. That is how your epistemology, your epistemic means have constructed a reality for you. And this reality, how you have conceptualized, makes you interact with the world in a particular way, uniquely different way. Okay? So in that particular sense, if there is a change in my epistemology, can that result in changing my own self? Is one of the interesting questions. In fact, this is debated very well by many scholars when they were trying to look at knowing and doing. Right? That was a very interesting kind of domain, but I'm not getting into that domain. This is where, if we are looking at transformation to be epistemological transformation, then you will find Socrates coming forward saying that knowledge of ignorance transforms life. He is not saying knowledge of knowledge. He says knowledge of ignorance transforms life, And you will find Plato turning to soar towards the truth. And Stoics make a lot of, provide a lot of material for this thing towards epistemic transformation. You would also find Spinoza talking about adequate ideas actually free us. If you don't have adequate ideas, adequate knowledge, then there is no freedom that you can exercise. Okay? So there are also, in the recent past, we have cognitive therapists who have argued towards the transformation, epistemic transformation, which is very important to them. To know differently, here, the crux of the story is, to know differently is to live differently. Can that become a part of us? Like, when you know it, does it make you live differently? transformation happens when false beliefs are replaced by true ones. So now again, I don't want to get into Getty's problem of just by true beliefs, but we do live with beliefs. So if that is the case, do we make an attempt to disprove certain kind of beliefs so that I live now, not for the sake of academic discussion, but I live now in a different way? So that becomes a very interesting question to look at for me. Similarly, if we are looking at metaphysical position, transformation, change in mode of being has to happen. And in fact, in this regard, I would urge that most of the Christian mystics would believe a kind of new being that comes into existence once they get close to the reality. And Advaita Vedanta also tells us that if there is, sitting here now, you are Brahman. If that is the case, the knowledge that you are Brahman, if it is digested properly, that will make you interact with the world in a different way. You don't change, reality will not change, but your actions will change. So you are a changed being in a different way. So Buddhism also, when it talks about no self-realization, gets into that. And Heidegger's inauthentic and authentic existence is also one of the wonderful examples of this metaphysical transformation that we are looking at. So the crux of this whole issue is not just new ideas, but new way of being in the world is something that emerges for the individual. And in fact, it is assumed that education should necessarily do such kind of work for the societies. Unfortunately, it's failing to do that. So this is where I try to integrate both epistemic and metaphysical transformations. And my position is to say that an onto-epistemic shift is what happens. So it's not just epistemic or metaphysical shift that happens in the being when the transformation happens. It is a kind of ontological change and epistemic change as well. So epistemic change necessarily leads to ontological change. So that's how I construct this onto-epistemic shift in the transformation, in which a change in knowing simultaneously becomes a change in being. And this is exactly probably the position of Advaita Vedanta of Shankara. It means a type of transformation where the boundary between epistemology, how I know, and ontology, what I am, collapses. So it's like, though I say that there are two steps, but there are no two steps. They happen simultaneously. A new way of knowing alters one's very sense of self and reality in this particular sense. So if I have to just give a small example and proceed to the next part of my talk. Say for example, if somebody comes and meets me, who are you, then I tend to introduce myself as I am a professor of philosophy in Delhi University. Actually, I am overemphasizing one of my roles as a human being and superimposing that to be the totality of me, which is a strange kind of thing. So most of the times we tend to identify ourselves with that work, job, whatever that we do. And the problems of that, obviously once you identify excessively, over-identify with something, the problems of that become your life problems. So there are other important things, other enjoyments, but this itself overwhelmingly overtakes you. Okay? So that's where this is not thinking that I am a professor, is not a belief, it is a reality. It is also a mode of being for me. Not through, now through a deep reflection, I can realize that my birth is not identical with my job. So that's what they say, when deep reflection happens, the transformation of my understanding that I am not just this would help me to transcend the fixedness that I have been assuming that, being as a teacher, I am fixed into certain kind of limitations. So that's where change in knowing things will necessarily lead to change in the way you conceptualize yourself as the being, the ontology. And that is very important for us. Here, this is not a mere informational change that happens. It is a kind of change how I relate to my work, how I face my loss, how I see myself in relation to other than professional domain. Okay, so that is how there is a onto-epistemic shift that happens in this regard. In fact, this kind of a position is available with Shankara, and when he says knowing Brahman is becoming Brahman, right? So Shankara's position is that, and Spinoza, to understand necessity is to become free, according to Spinoza. So Spinoza's position is also close to that. And there is a philosopher by name Perry Haddo. I don't know how many of you know about him. He is the one who has brought this discussion on philosophy as way of life. Okay, now it's a big movement in the West, though it was part of Indian tradition for a long time. But now they bring it as a new movement in the West. I see many conferences happening on philosophy as way of life because of this particular author Haddo. And now recently, even in Europe and Americas, they are working on transformative philosophy. Their contention is, especially Professor Lydia Amir is working in this area, her contention is that unfortunately only Eastern philosophies are considered to be transformative in nature, and she wants to acknowledge that, but she says, I have counter-example from Western tradition, and she tries to argue that most of the philosophers of the Western tradition also try to understand philosophy as a transformative discipline. Okay, so that's a position that comes forward. But of course, we do understand that these two are two different kind of transformations that we are talking about. So the point that I'm trying to emphasize is to know truly is to become otherwise. So is this possible with us? I'm not just asking a general question for the academic purpose. I also want all of us to reflect on our own actions and our own being and see whether that is possible. Whether that happened at any point of time in your life. That's what is important to me. Okay? So that is where transformative philosophy, I have written a brief definition of it, I will read it out. Transformative philosophy reveals that the boundary between knowing and being is itself unstable. To see the world differently is already to exist differently. Transformation is therefore neither purely epistemological, metaphysical, but an onto-epistemic reorientation of the self. That's what is important. So that is the crux of what I'm trying to establish through this paper. So I believe that philosophical counseling is one of wonderful tools which is a part of philosophical practices, which is a larger umbrella. And this philosophical counseling actually it attempts this kind of onto-epistemic reorientation of the self. So that's what it tries to do through the dialogue. Okay, a change in understanding can reorient a life, but counseling makes this experiential, dialogical, and concrete. So I do acknowledge the fact that philosophy basically is also understood to be a transformative discipline. That's my first position. Second position is, but if you see it to be practicing in your life, how do you practice? In a dialogical form, experiential form, and in a very concrete form where you see yourself to be existing, then it is more relevant to your own life, not just as a reader, but you actually become part of philosophy itself, or you make philosophy part of you. Okay, so that's what is important to me. So that's where philosophy definitely, transformative philosophy definitely explores ideas, truth, meaning, freedom kind of ideas. But philosophical counseling tries to apply them to lived situations. And philosophy, as transformative one, works at the conceptual level, but philosophical counseling works at existential level. And philosophy as a transformative discipline reflects on life. Philosophical counseling, in fact, helps you to intervene with your own life. So that is the very important aspect that happens. To help a person become otherwise by reflective self-understanding is the goal for both philosophy and philosophical counseling. This is how I read and understand. If I have to briefly explain, because philosophical counseling is a broader area, if I have to briefly explain, philosophical counseling transforms at the four level, transforms the individual at the four level. One is conceptual, where clarifying hidden assumptions becomes very important. I mean, when people come with, we should understand one point that not all human problems are biological in nature. Okay, there are some problems which are beyond the biology, and not all problems are psychological in nature as well. Okay, so it's not that biology and psychology exhaust the whole domain of human life. There are interesting kind of crisis situations that we come across which fall beyond biological problems and psychological issues, concerns. And I believe that's where philosophy has a strong place to play. That's where philosophy can actually do something to human life in a direct, impactful way. So that's where, and I'm saying when you, as I said, you conceptualize the reality in your own way. When you conceptualize the reality in your own way, it's based on your own experiential self and rationality that helps you to conceptualize the world in your own way. There may be some hidden assumptions which you haven't come across, you haven't delved deep into, you haven't reflected. No, that's why Socrates says, unexamined life is not worth living. If you are teaching philosophy for so many years and if you don't reflect on your own knowledge or your own practices, then it's not worth living according to Socrates. It's a very, don't read it, take the hit of it, then probably we will understand the impact of that. So that is how hidden assumptions with which we live ought to be brought into what Professor Sebastian was saying yesterday, operative consciousness, I would say. It's operative consciousness is not completely, it is not an unawareness kind of one for me. I would say that operative consciousness also has to be at some point, you should be aware of it. I'm not getting into the transcendental consciousness debate, but otherwise, this is my own understanding of how do I relate it to philosophical practices. So, philosophical counseling basically transforms conceptual one, where clarifying hidden assumptions become very important because we live with a lot of hidden assumptions. And it also affects the narrative. Reframing of life stories is one of the major concerns because many people tend to think that, especially now, recently I met a girl who told me that, sir, I am under severe depression. I said, what happened to you? So we had a discussion. Don't laugh. She is studying 4th standard and she says, I am under depression. now how do you, even then I patiently sat with her and had a long discussion for an hour, try to understand, the epistemology that we construct, the words that we throw construct the epistemology around the society, and society absorbs it. Unfortunately, younger ones absorb that very quickly, and they start creating their own life stories in a particular way, based on the social epistemology. That's why for me, social epistemology has to be seriously looked at and studied, because that impacts the individual epistemologies, So this is where, reframing of the life stories cannot happen unless you take this tagline of Socrates, unexamined life is not worth living. That's the tagline, Reframing of life stories become very important. That's how it's also a transformation of the narrative, self-narrative. It is ethical as well in the sense that realignment of the values is possible only through philosophical practices. This cannot happen with if you go to a doctor in general or if you go to a psychiatrist. Probably they would give you some pills as well. Because the problem is not purely psychological in nature there. And other important transformation that happens in philosophical counseling is existential. It reshapes one's way of being. So that is how once you have the knowledge becomes a part of you in such a way that you cannot but act in consonance with it. So that's very important for us. And how do you make these things happen? It is very easy to say. If I am also just leaving it at the level of saying, then I am also doing academic philosophy. So this is where I am trying to deviate a bit and try to look at other philosophical counselors in the recent past who have spoken about this, like actually the power to transform the individual. And there is another philosopher by the name Lou Maranoff who argues that philosophy for life problems is to be specifically looked at to see the transformation. And we have Eliot Cohen and others who have worked on logic-based therapy, and they are very impactful methodologies, very precise and impactful methodologies that have come from them. And in fact, if we want to extend it further, I would say Michael Foucault also talks about care of the self as self-formation. So if we explore into that, that also would be of very helpful in this regard. So, but I'm not saying that this is similar to psychological therapy, because psychological therapy necessarily involves a kind of healing of a dysfunction. So that's how it sees. And it also focuses on symptoms. There are no symptoms here in philosophical counseling. And it is clinical. Psychological counseling is clinical, whereas philosophical counseling is more existential and ethical. So that's where philosophical counseling is the lived practice of transformative philosophy. It does not treat disorders, but cultivates a different way of understanding and inhabiting one's own life. So that's where the second part of my talk ends. Now I am bringing in the third part. I am bringing the Indian sources. So I have been working on Anekantavada of Jainism, which very a wonderful resource to help individuals in dealing with certain kind of concerns by making them reorient with themselves, by dislocating themselves from the center that they are overly focused. And I'm also looking at, in the recent past, I have been working on Panchadasi. Panchadasi is a wonderful text that was written by Swami Vidyaranya. Unfortunately, in the academic circles, this is not much debated. But Panchadasi is a Prakarana Grantha. And Prakarana Granthas are basically written for a purpose. The purpose is to reach out to the people who are not specialists. So how do you reach out to the people who are not specialists? By giving a lot of examples, a lot of metaphors, right? And these metaphors and examples are the best means that work as tools in the philosophical counseling practice. So that is how these days when students come saying that I am interested in philosophical counseling, I ask them, what have you read, what are you doing? They say, I am interested. This is a different kind of, it's like, just saying I am interested will not mean anything unless your interest has prompted you to look at some problem and address it in a theoretical way, and also to see the practical possibilities of resolving it, and looking for the resources that you can generate from the traditions that you have been acquainted with. Otherwise, interest is only an empty word. No? I am reading Pramana Samuchaya these days. Dinnaga says, word Sabdasunyo, Arthasunyo Sabda, sorry. Words do not have any meaning according to him. These days, that's how we use. Even the girl that I'm referring to, 4th standard girl, and she says, I'm anxious, no? She doesn't mean anything, but she won't that empty word with such gravity that she thinks that she is, no? She's suffering. So, it is important to address such kind of things. So I'll just take a few, probably 10 minutes. 2, 3, okay, yeah. Panchadasi has 5, the title itself tells us that there are 15 chapters, and these 15 chapters are put together into 3 groups, which are called Prakaranas. Each chapter is called Prakarana, and 3 groups are called Panchaka, Viveka Panchaka, Deepa Panchaka, and Ananda Panchaka. These are the threefold. This is the threefold distinction that happens in the text. These 3 represent basically Sat, Chit, Ananda. So Viveka Panchaka is about Sat in the sense of reality that we are dealing with, and then Deepa Panchaka deals with Chit, which is a kind of illumination of consciousness, And then Ananda Panchaka is about bliss that we is part of Satchidananda. In other words, Viveka Panchaka is not 5 abstract categories, but 5 specific chapters in the text focused on discriminating real from unreal, thus preparing the mind for liberation. So this particular one, Viveka Panchaka that I am talking about, obviously has 5 chapters, and each of these chapters are developed with a particular goal, but there is a particular methodology and practice that is given as a part of the teaching. That is what is very important. What kind of practices that the text gives us can be taken out as a tool for me in using it in philosophical counseling. That's what I have been doing. So that is how the first chapter of Viveka Panchaka is Viveka. I assume all of us know, right? Viveka is, I would say, Viveka is more than knowledge. Viveka can be translated loosely into English as wisdom, but Viveka is understood in terms of discriminatory knowledge, in the sense that Nitya Anitya Vastu Viveka. Viveka is always understood in terms of Nitya Anitya Vastu Viveka. So the distinction between real and unreal is what comes out to be very important in this regard. And this becomes a very important aspect even in philosophical counseling, because most of the times when people come with a concern, they assume something that is not real to be real. So how do you help that? No, it's not a metaphysical concern. I mean, I'm not talking about Raju Sarpa Bhranti kind of. I mean, Brahman. Wrongly understanding Brahman. I'm talking about a real life living situation where you assume something wrong to be, something else to be something. So that is the kind of situation that I'm referring to here. So Tattva Viveka basically addresses this Nitya Nitya Vastu Viveka, discrimination of reality. And the transformative effect that it tries to bring is breaking the basic falsity between false identity of I as and the body and the mind to I am what I am. I mean, going beyond the identities that we, as I said, I am a professor. This is an identity. So this excessive identity creates a problem for me. And helping the individual, whoever comes, if this can be used as a tool to make the individual understand that this is only the limitedness and this is not the totality of the self. Okay, so the practice that this particular text, it requires a lot of elaboration, I understand, but I don't have time, so let me quickly move to all these 5 by emphasizing on the practice that they give us. For me, the tools, practical tools are more important than theoretical basis. So practice that this particular first Tattva Viveka tries to give us is reflection on witness consciousness and changing experiences. So, for example, if you start seeing your, excessively, whatever that you are excessively identifying, if you focus on that, say, becoming witness self, that helps you to make a distinction between that and you. And this witness self practice itself will have a huge impact. I have seen it. I have implemented it in some of my counseling sessions. When some people had issues, then we trained them to witness themselves. That really had a therapeutic impact on the individual. And similar is the second chapter that comes forward in terms of Panchaphuta Viveka, which is discrimination of 5 elements. But here we are not taking 5 elements, no? That's not my purpose, because I am using it in philosophical counseling. I see the methodologies that was used. The methodology that was used to make this Panchaphuta Viveka possible for the individual is neti, not this, of each of the things that you assume to be you. No? So this really helps individuals. That's the second one. Yeah, just 3 more points. And then the third chapter is Panchakosha Viveka, where we know, Annamaya, Manomaya, Pranamaya, Vijnanamaya, Anandamaya, 5 Panchakoshas that Taittiriya Upanishad talks about, are very well discussed. Actually, some people are arguing that this Panchakosha is not useful at all in many of the aspects, and there is not much academic study and use also in the classical texts. But Panchadasi uses this Panchakosha methodology very well. And the practice that it tries to give us is sequential intellectual negation plus awareness of the witness. That's what comes out in a very interesting way, and that's what I found to be useful for philosophical counseling. Similarly, Dvaita Viveka, discrimination of the duality. This is presented in terms of Athyaropa Apavada methodology, where you impose something, superimpose something, and then you make people understand that what is superimposed is not the reality, rather something else exists beyond. So this method also I have used it in philosophical counseling, which was very helpful. And finally, Mahavakya Viveka provides a methodology that all of us know, Sravana Manana Nitithyasa. This is a very loosely understood one, because people think that Sravana Manana Nitithyasa is basically accepting whatever is given without any questioning, but each step demands certain kind of questioning. Otherwise, you cannot move from Sravana to Manana at all without questioning it. You know, the first step is, what is it that is being said? What is it that I am saying? The second one is, do I accept what he has said? Third one is it available in my experience? So these are the three interesting levels Sravana, Manana and Nitithyasa tries to provide, which is also very helpful in counseling practices that I have been doing. So this is where I would stop. Basically the points are, Viveka Panchakam of Panchadasi is a methodological logic and practice section of Advaita Vedanta text called Panchadasi. It is designed to dismantle false identification that often we resort to. A sequence of discriminatory practice and exercises leading towards understanding, self-understanding is what comes out in this text. It is more than a theory, it is a transformative inquiry. That's what this text provides as a resource for philosophical counseling. Yeah, thank you so much.
Well, Professor Ganapathy, in short, has taken us in a new direction. That is epistemic transformation. How philosophy can really transform our life, being and knowing. Professor A.J. Iyer, after his retirement, he said, all these years I have been involved in the analytic philosophy and having not much impact, but it has enabled me to live my livelihood. So a lot of people, even eminent philosophers or eminent scientists, they have such a kind of a life. So he has raised in a very novel way how we should really have a proper connection between our theoretical speculation, reflection, and our actual living, our inner motive, etc. So in short, that is what he has presented. Now his paper is open for discussion, question, comments, and even suggestion. Okay. Yeah, okay.
Can you? No, you can sit in.
You sit down and.
Respected sir, may I be allowed to make some observation on?
Sure, definitely. You're welcome.
I'm really thankful, sir, and obviously you don't know me, but I have been listening to you and I've been following you for long, since my institutional student days. However, I'm still a student of philosophy. And I just want to share everyone that the very philosophical counseling for transform one's own self, which is somehow not available or not possible through only by means of biological therapy or psychological therapy. One example is I myself. Because at some point of time in my early career, my ma'am knows, and many other people know, I was in a crisis which may be a kind of a fear of missing out. And there my problem I was wrestling with that many of my works, many of my ideas that have been rejected by some of the institutions. And for the very reason, while my talk I have always referred to Lokkhida as my Margdarshaka, because after some point of time, suddenly my works started recognizing. And I was happy at that point because I did not know, I did not examine exactly the points they are referring to. I have never asked the question, what is it for me to exist meaningfully? And whether exactly that is the thing what I am actually looking for. And when UNICEF hired me for their peace program, and the paper what I have presented, and I'm really grateful to Sir and Lokkhida that you have appreciated my points. But since there were certain issues involving Google, the company as a whole, then many people, all of a sudden, started working with me, and they are ready to spend many funds and many things on me. But now, then I realize that this is also not the thing that I actually longed for. And there was the problem I was suffering from until Lokkhida taking me the refuge. That was a bewilderment of situatedness. And that was again something literally on record. I have that prescription also. My psychiatrist told me that this is not a case of pure psychiatric therapy. And of course, if anyone can understand that that was not a biological problem as well. And I then just dive on Lokkhida's feet. Lokkhida then started assigning me some tasks in different ways, which I am not going to make. But then now I am in a position, the moment I ask myself, what is it for me to do something meaningfully, to exist meaningfully? I somehow, the method, without knowing that I am following your method, but somehow I can choose certain methods, choose certain things, decide certain things to do and not to do. And most of the cases, following your very basic principle that you have talked about, no, this is not. Niti, no, this is not. And that thing, I don't know whether knowing or unknowingly, Lokkhida imposed on me. And so I can relate your thoughts. And for others, this is really, if someone wants an example, I am the example. Thank you, sir.
All right, any other? Yeah, please, Officer Sebastian.
I really enjoyed your talk. Well, having said that, having said that, I have one or two issues to talk about. Let me come back to my favorite positions. Ravisha, Kena, Kada, Ragadarniga, Chandogia. Let me take two examples from two positions. One is the Ragadarniga positions. That is the Antivalkias, the question asked by the great Antivalkia. What is that by knowing which everything is known? Is it this? Is it this? Not this, not this. Neti, neti. Then we have a beautiful example from, Chandogya Upanishad, Udaragagni. He said, I have only one son, he was sent for higher education for 13 years. After learning everything from ontology to existentialism and everything, he came back to his father's abode. And of course, his father asked him only one simple question. What is that by knowing which everything is known? So, although I studied all epistemology and ontology, and everything, but I had not been taught. I did not answer about that. Then of course you see, you are that. No, you know. Tattvamasi, you are that. Iti. No. So there are two techniques, no, through the help of which the Upanishad spheres have been trying to appropriate the meaning of self, either by neti neti or by iti iti. Now my question is that, do you mean to think that, don't you think that this is a kind of, a counseling, a philosophical counseling, okay, better than many other, Western tradition. Now let me go back to my own neighbor, Sri Shankaracharya. Because the Brahmasutra Bhashya is beautiful sentence, because I have been repeatedly talking about this sentence for a long time. I have been teaching, not just sir, I'm 44 years, I have been teaching in the teaching side now. 27 years I have been teaching in process, especially in epistemology and especially in metaphysics. So there's a sentence by Shankaracharya. As long as the knowledge of the self, which is to be sort of transport arises, so long the self is a knower. But the same self, same knower, turns out to be the self, devoid of evil and blemish. That turns out to be the self means that they can't be self. We can't. Now there is saying empirical self, empirical ego, or empirical self. It translates itself as the transcendental self. Okay. So now my question is that this evolution, transformation, which happened within myself, not by knowing not the sense of efficiency that I'm talking about, but it's a kind of a inclusive understanding about my own self as myself. Is it not a good philosophical counseling by within myself? Would you please answer me?
Yeah, thank you so much for this wonderful example that you have given as your own life. Thanks for that. And thank you so much, sir, for both the questions. I completely agree with both the points that you have said. We have been looking at Upanishadic resources for philosophical counseling, and in which obviously we are looking at all these aspects. In fact, the question that Yagyavalkya asks is, by knowing what everything unheard becomes heard,
Yes.
unknown becomes known, unthought of becomes thought of, amatam matam avijñātam vijñātam iti. So that's what it says. Whereas in Brihadaranyaka, by knowing something,
Yes.
how do you know everything? So that's, different kind of questions come forward. In fact, I have been working on questions that are posed and resolved in Upanishads. I'm preparing a list of it, which would be helpful as a resource. But I do agree with this point that neti neti and iti iti, both of them are wonderful methods. But I felt that neti neti is more helpful because the person who comes to us has already identified himself as iti iti. So this is to be negated. Unless this is negated, we cannot take him to what we are trying to do. So that is how I would respond to the first one. And second one, of course, understanding the limitations of the empirical self would definitely lead to transcendental realization of the transcendental self is very well taken. And this also can become. But one aspect that I want to say is philosophical counseling is not soteriologically oriented. Our traditions are soteriologically oriented, and I am taking tools from soteriologically oriented traditions and using them as addressing the existential issues. It's not that these tools, since they were used only in the soteriological context, they are not useful to us in the existential context. So that's what I'm trying to do. Yeah.
Okay, last question for Professor Pati.
Yeah, it's got a wonderful, Professor Bala. Specifically, the comparative part in the Viveka and you are very right in comparing it to Sravana Manana Nidhyasana, the methodology. One concept in Gita is Sambhava. And I think the philosophical counseling, where a patient, not patient, an individual, comes to me when he or she is in a vimarsa position. That's why he is in Vishada. There is a chapter called Arjun Vishada Yoga in Bhagavad Gita. So Arjun has renunciated everything and sacrificed everything. No, I don't want to fight. So he, psychologically, he was total under the Vishada condition. But being a counselor, Sri Krishna gives him impetus. No, you do this. So here, both ethics, individuality, and this dialogue, sambhara, comes into the same line. Similar thing is also available in Kautilya Shastra. Even in Vivekana's Dharma Shastra. But there is a word called empathy. And it has a direct root to the problem of other mind in epistemology. And Wittgenstein has given a beautiful solution to the problem of other mind. He said it is only the language that can solve the problem of other mind. But Wittgenstein never referred to empathy, or empathy was never referred by in Gita. So now an empathy is a very, very difficult term to understand. How can I put myself in your position? Again, the same problem of other mind comes to discussion. So whether in psychological counseling, do you find any such kind of empathy, notion of empathy, while you are making its root in Upanishads, Vedas, Panchadasi, or even in so many Samvadak like texts? Is there any? That is my, because that is a very, if that is there actually, then that could be a new horizon to your thing. Yeah.
Great, thank you so much.
May I
Thanks.
just make a comment to
Yeah,
what
please.
Rashmikant said? So as far as I know, a counselor is not supposed to instruct you, do this. A counselor is supposed to show you the options. It's up to you to choose the one. So in Gita, Sri Krishna is instructing Arjuna, but in real life, can you do that? I do not. It's a question.
Yeah. Let me clarify things. Number one is, this is all, there is a lot of debate on whether Gita can be considered to be a counseling text. Okay. At least in the philosophical counseling sense, there is a lot of discussion going on. And I do believe that a text which says that Mamekam Saranam Raja is not counseling at all. So in that particular sense, it cannot be. But I have a published paper on philosophical counseling, what kind of tools can be taken from Bhagavad Gita for philosophical counseling. I talk about dialogical self. That's where your empathy also I am trying to address. There is a dialogical self that happens within each one of us, which takes a lot of I positions, which means each one of us, with regard to any aspect, will have different I positions. I want this, I want this, I want this, I want this as well. So all these I positions are in conflict all the time. For example, if you look at Ravana, there are a number of I positions that he takes, that disturb him and which make him to choose the wrong one. So how do you come out of these I positions? I looked at Bhagavad Gita and how Krishna helps Arjuna to address these different I positions and come out with one authentic position. So, I mean, there are different ways of looking at the text. I am not saying that they are counseling texts. I am saying texts have a lot of tools for us. They have approaches which are hidden in them. And we are supposed to reread them to orient, to help us for this counseling mechanism. That's what I would respond. With regard to empathy, basically, in counseling, I believe in philosophical counseling, empathy is not a good thing. Okay, because empathy is asked to be there in the counselor. If counselor is empathetic, then you will not be able to push the other sharply with your questions to get into one's own self. You should not be empathetic. You should ask questions in such a way that the other would start reflecting, examining oneself. If you are considerate, then it is gone. Counseling cannot proceed further. That's my view. Thank you so much. Thanks.
Thank you. you very much, Professor Balaganapathi. I think your tea is getting cold.
Yeah.
Have you?
Replace the tea.
Now we come to the next speaker, that is Professor Vikram Singh Sirola. I don't have much contact with him before, but this last year during the Indian Philosophical Congress, during December and late November, a lot of flights were